They called him a liability, a rogue operator whose methods were too dangerous, too unpredictable for modern warfare. Captain Jack Morrison sat in the debriefing room, watching his career dissolve in real time as three-star generals reviewed footage of his latest unauthorized deviation from protocol. On the screen, grainy surveillance video showed him single-handedly infiltrating a heavily fortified compound in North Korea, extracting 2 captured Navy SEALs while eliminating 17 enemy combatants without a single American casualty. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Impressive results, General Patterson admitted, his voice carrying the weight of institutional authority. But it is a completely unacceptable methodology. What none of them knew was that in 72 hours, Jack Morrison would become the only hope for 75 American prisoners of war trapped in a facility that intelligence claimed didn't exist. His court-martial hearing would be interrupted by an emergency that would transform his greatest weakness into their only salvation. The fluorescent lights in Conference Room Delta cast harsh shadows across the mahogany table where Jack Morrison's military career was being systematically dismantled. 3 generals, 2 colonels, and a Pentagon liaison sat across from him, their expressions ranging from disappointment to barely concealed anger. Behind them, a wall-mounted display showed his service record, 8 years of missions that read like action movie scripts, each one successful, each one accomplished through methods that made his superiors increasingly uncomfortable. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Blake shuffled through a thick folder containing incident reports spanning the last 18 months. Her voice carried the crisp authority of someone accustomed to delivering verdicts that ended careers. Captain Morrison, your tactical innovations have resulted in 0 American casualties across 14 high-risk operations. Your success rate is unprecedented in special operations history. Jack remained silent, knowing that praise delivered in this tone was merely the setup for professional execution. However, Blake continued, your consistent disregard for chain of command, unauthorized modifications to mission parameters, and tendency to operate outside established protocols have created a pattern of behavior that this board considers incompatible with military discipline. General Patterson leaned forward, his weathered hands clasped on the polished surface. Jack, you're one of the most naturally gifted operators I've encountered in 30 years of service. Your ability to read terrain, anticipate enemy movements, and adapt to changing tactical situations is remarkable. But the military is not a one-man show. The video screen flickered to life, displaying mission footage from Syria. Jack watched himself, moving through a bombed-out building with the fluid precision of someone who had internalized combat like a second language. The original mission parameters had called for surveillance and intelligence gathering. Instead, he had identified an opportunity to eliminate a high-value target and disrupted an entire terrorist cell's operational capacity. You were ordered to observe and report, Colonel Mitchell stated, his finger pointing at the screen. Instead, you initiated contact, called in airstrikes, and turned a reconnaissance mission into a full-scale assault operation. The target was preparing to execute 12 captured aid workers, Jack replied, speaking for the first time since the hearing began. Waiting for authorization would have meant watching them die while headquarters debated acceptable risk parameters. That decision was not yours to make, Patterson responded. We have established procedures for exactly these situations. Procedures that exist to prevent single operators from escalating conflicts beyond our ability to control them. The folder in front of Blake contains similar incidents from Iraq, Afghanistan, and Somalia. Each mission report told the same story. Jack Morrison identifying opportunities that official intelligence had missed, taking initiative that violated direct orders, and achieving tactical objectives that conventional approaches couldn't have accomplished. His methods saved lives and eliminated threats, but they also created diplomatic complications and operational unpredictability that military leadership couldn't tolerate. Your psychological evaluation indicates difficulty accepting authority. When you disagree with tactical decisions, Blake continued, reading from a document marked with psychological assessment headers. Dr. Reeves notes that you exhibit classic symptoms of what he terms tactical narcissism, an inflated confidence in your own judgment that leads to disregard for institutional knowledge and established procedures. Jack had submitted to 6 hours of psychological testing, answering questions designed to probe his motivations and decision-making processes. The evaluation concluded that his independence was a liability rather than an asset, that his success record had created dangerous overconfidence in his ability to improvise solutions to complex tactical problems. Captain Morrison, General Patterson, said, his tone shifting to something that might have been paternal concern. You're being reassigned to Fort Bragg's training command. You'll be instructing new recruits in basic combat techniques while we determine whether continued service is appropriate. The reassignment was career suicide disguised as administrative necessity. Training command was where the military sent officers whose skills were too valuable to waste, but whose attitudes made them unsuitable for operational assignments. Jack would spend his days teaching 19-year-old recruits how to field strip weapons while watching younger, less experienced officers lead missions he could have completed with his eyes closed. Your security clearance is being downgraded. From top secret to secret, Blake added, reading from another document. You'll no longer have access to classified intelligence briefings or operational planning sessions. Your weapons authorization is restricted to training purposes only. The bureaucratic dismantling was thorough and efficient. Within 48 hours, Jack would be transferred from the elite special operations community to a training facility, where his primary responsibility would be ensuring that recruits maintained proper uniform standards and completed obstacle courses within acceptable time limits. Colonel Mitchell closed his folder with the finality of a coffin lid. Captain, your record shows exceptional tactical competence, but military effectiveness requires more than individual skill. It requires the ability to function within established command structures and accept decisions made by officers with broader strategic perspectives. Jack understood the subtext. His superiors weren't questioning his ability to complete missions. They were questioning his willingness to accept missions that he knew were planned inadequately or based on intelligence that didn't match ground truth. His success rate was actually evidence against him, proof that he was operating outside acceptable parameters while achieving results that made their conventional approaches look ineffective. The decision has been made, Patterson announced. You'll report to Fort Bragg Monday morning. Major Stevens will brief you on your new responsibilities. The hearing concluded with administrative efficiency that contrasted sharply with the years of combat experience being relegated to irrelevance. Jack collected his personal items and walked through corridors that had once represented the pinnacle of military achievement. Special operations personnel nodded respectfully as he passed, their expressions reflecting awareness that exceptional competence was being sacrificed to institutional comfort. His quarters at Fort Campbell contained 8 years of accumulated military life, campaign ribbons that documented service in every major conflict zone, photographs with teammates who had died in operations that Jack's innovations might have prevented, and equipment that had been modified according to lessons learned through trial and error in environments where mistakes meant death. The packing process was methodical and depressing. Each item represented capabilities that would no longer be utilized, experience that would be wasted on administrative duties, and training responsibilities that could be handled by officers with half his qualifications. His custom rifle, zeroed for his specific shooting style and modified with components selected through years of operational refinement, would be turned into the armory where it would gather dust until eventually being issued to someone who had never fired a shot in anger. His tactical gear told stories of missions that official reports couldn't capture. Body armor that had stopped shrapnel in Fallujah, night vision equipment that had enabled impossible insertions in Afghanistan, and communication devices that had coordinated operations across multiple time zones and hostile territories. Everything would be inventoried and redistributed to operators who possessed authorization that Jack had lost through the crime of being too effective in unauthorized ways. The final item was a folder containing letters from families of soldiers whose lives Jack had saved through tactical decisions that violated direct orders. Parents thanking him for bringing their sons home alive, wives grateful that their husbands had survived deployments that should have been fatal, children who would grow up with fathers because Jack Morrison had refused to follow procedures that would have resulted in unnecessary casualties. These letters weren't part of his official record, but they represented the true measure of his military service. Institutional authorities measured success through adherence to protocols and maintenance of command relationships. Jack measured success through soldiers who returned home alive to families who never knew how close they had come to receiving folded flags instead of homecoming embraces. Fort Bragg represented professional exile disguised as continued service. Jack would maintain his rank and draw his salary while being systematically excluded from operations where his experience could make the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The military was protecting itself from his competence while ensuring that future tactical situations would be handled by officers whose primary qualification was their willingness to follow orders regardless of their tactical inadequacy. What military leadership didn't understand was that wars weren't won by following procedures. They were won by individuals who possessed the judgment to recognize when procedures would result in failure and the courage to improvise solutions that institutional thinking couldn't anticipate. Jack Morrison was being punished for possessing exactly the qualities that effective military operations required, condemned for succeeding in ways that threatened bureaucratic control over life and death decisions. The irony wasn't lost on him. In 72 hours, his institutional exile would position him perfectly to undertake a mission that would require every tactical innovation and procedural violation that had destroyed his official career. The intelligence briefing room at Langley buzzed with the controlled tension that characterized high-stakes operations planning. Analyst Rebecca Chen stared at satellite imagery spread across 3 monitors, her expression growing increasingly troubled as she correlated data from multiple sources. The photograph showed what appeared to be a standard military installation in the remote mountains of North Korea, but subtle details suggested something far more significant than routine border security. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Heat signatures indicated underground facilities that extended far deeper than surface. Structures would require. Vehicle patterns showed supply convoys arriving with suspicious regularity for a location that officially housed only Border Patrol units. Most concerning were the communication intercepts that suggested the facility was receiving high-priority personnel and equipment from Pyongyang's most sensitive military programs. Director Walsh needs to see this immediately, Chun muttered to her supervisor, Marcus Rodriguez, who was reviewing similar anomalies from a facility that intelligence databases claimed didn't exist in any official capacity. Rodriguez had spent 15 years analyzing North Korean military infrastructure, developing an intuitive understanding of how their operational patterns revealed strategic intentions. The data Chen was presenting didn't match any known facility configurations, suggesting either a significant intelligence gap or the existence of a black site operation that had escaped previous detection efforts. What's the prisoner estimate based on current intelligence? Rodriguez asked, studying thermal imaging that showed movement patterns inside buildings designed to house far more personnel than border security operations would require. Conservative estimates suggest between 60 and 80 individuals being held in underground sections, Chun replied, highlighting areas where architectural analysis indicated modified basement structures. But communication intercepts reference processing numbers that could indicate higher occupancy rates. The facility had appeared on intelligence radar 3 months earlier when satellite surveillance detected construction activities that seemed disproportionate to the region's strategic importance. Initial assessments dismissed it as routine military infrastructure development, but subsequent monitoring revealed operational patterns that suggested something far more significant than standard military installation expansion. Communication intercepts had been fragmented and difficult to decode, but key phrases suggested the facility was receiving high-value packages and priority specimens that required specialized security protocols. The language was consistent with prisoner detention operations, but the scale and sophistication implied capabilities that exceeded known North Korean detention facilities. Director Walsh isn't going to approve reconnaissance missions based on circumstantial evidence, Rodriguez warned, understanding the institutional reluctance to commit resources to operations that lacked definitive intelligence confirmation. We need more concrete verification before escalating this to operational planning levels. The challenge was that gathering additional intelligence required closer surveillance methods that would expose reconnaissance assets to detection and possible capture. North Korean border security had been enhanced significantly following recent diplomatic tensions, making traditional intelligence gathering operations extremely risky for personnel who lacked specialized infiltration capabilities. Chun pulled up communication intercepts from the past 48 hours, translations that revealed increasing urgency in facility communications. References to processing schedules and final preparations suggested that whatever operation the facility supported was approaching a critical phase that could have significant implications for American personnel who might be detained there. These intercepts mention American assets specifically, Chun pointed out, highlighting translated segments that referenced prisoners with knowledge of strategic capabilities and operational intelligence. The language suggested that captured American military personnel were being subjected to enhanced interrogation, techniques designed to extract sensitive information about U.S. military operations and capabilities. The timing was particularly concerning, given recent military tensions in the region. 3 weeks earlier, an American reconnaissance aircraft had been forced down over disputed territory, and its crew of 4 had been declared missing in action. Official diplomatic channels had produced no information about their whereabouts, but the communication intercepts suggested they might be among the prisoners being held at the mysterious facility. Director Walsh entered the briefing room with the measured urgency that characterized senior intelligence officials dealing with developing crises. His expression reflected the weight of making decisions that could affect international relations and American lives based on incomplete information that might be misinterpreted or deliberately misleading. "Show me what we have," Walsh demanded, studying the satellite imagery while Chun briefed him on the facility's anomalous characteristics and the communication intercepts that suggested large-scale prisoner detention operations. The briefing lasted 45 minutes, covering every piece of available intelligence while acknowledging the significant gaps that prevented definitive assessment of the facility's purpose and the number of Americans who might be detained there. Walsh's questions revealed his understanding that traditional intelligence methods had limitations when dealing with facilities designed specifically to avoid detection and analysis. "What are our options for closer reconnaissance?" Walsh asked, knowing that the answer would involve significant risks to personnel who possessed capabilities that couldn't be easily replaced if operations went wrong. "Standard reconnaissance. Teams lack the specialized infiltration skills required for this type of target, Rodriguez admitted. The facility's security protocols and terrain challenges would require operators with unconventional warfare experience and the ability to adapt to changing tactical situations without external support. The conversation highlighted a critical weakness in current intelligence capabilities. The military had systematically reduced emphasis on individual operator autonomy in favor of technology-dependent approaches that required external support and established communication links. Operations in denied territory required personnel who could function independently while gathering intelligence that conventional methods couldn't obtain. What about Special Operations Command? Walsh inquired, referring to elite units that theoretically possessed the capabilities required for high-risk reconnaissance missions in hostile territory. They're requesting minimum team sizes and extensive support packages that would make covert insertion impossible. Rodriguez replied, consulting operational requirements that emphasize safety and redundancy over tactical flexibility. Their planning timeline extends 6 weeks, and mission approval requires interagency coordination that could compromise operational security. The institutional approach to special operations had evolved toward risk management and bureaucratic oversight that prioritized personnel protection over mission accomplishment. While this approach reduced casualties during routine operations, it also eliminated the tactical flexibility required for situations that demanded rapid response and innovative problem-solving. Chun displayed additional satellite imagery showing recent construction activities around the facility's perimeter. New security installations suggested that North Korean authorities were enhancing defensive capabilities in anticipation of potential rescue attempts or intelligence-gathering operations. The window for covert reconnaissance was closing as enemy preparations made infiltration increasingly difficult. The facility's communication patterns suggest they're preparing for something significant, Chun observed, pointing to intercepts that reference timeline acceleration and resource prioritization. Whatever they're planning appears to be reaching a critical phase that could affect prisoner welfare and information security. The implications were clear. If American personnel were being held at the facility, their interrogation was being intensified in preparation for some form of final disposition that could include execution or transfer to facilities where rescue would be impossible. The timeline for potential intervention was measured in days rather than weeks or months. Walsh studied the intelligence briefing materials while processing the political implications of authorizing operations that could escalate into international incidents if personnel were captured or killed. The intelligence was compelling but not definitive, creating a situation where action and inaction both carried significant risks that could affect American lives and strategic interests. I need recommendations for immediate next steps, Walsh stated, understanding that intelligence gathering was meaningless without operational capabilities that could act on the information being developed. The room fell silent as senior analysts recognized that conventional options were inadequate for the tactical situation they were facing. Standard procedures required weeks of planning and interagency coordination, but the intelligence suggested that American lives were at immediate risk in a facility that might not exist according to official assessments. Rodriguez consulted personnel files on special operations officers who possessed unconventional warfare experience and the ability to operate independently in denied territory. The list was remarkably short, as most operators with those capabilities had been reassigned to training positions or administrative roles following institutional emphasis on conventional tactics and bureaucratic oversight. There is one possibility, Rodriguez mentioned reluctantly, knowing that his suggestion would create bureaucratic complications that could affect his career prospects. Captain Jack Morrison has the specific skill set required for this type of operation, but he's currently undergoing reassignment following disciplinary action. Walsh's expression reflected his recognition of Morrison's reputation for tactical innovation and successful completion of impossible missions through methods that institutional authorities found concerning. Morrison's recent disciplinary problems were the result of exactly the kind of independent thinking and tactical flexibility that this situation would require. Morrison's been classified as unsuitable for operational assignments, Walsh noted, reviewing the personnel file that documented 8 years of mission successes achieved through protocol violations and unauthorized tactical modifications. His psychological evaluation indicates difficulty accepting authority and tendency toward unilateral decision-making, which are exactly the qualities required for reconnaissance operations in denied territory without external support. Rodriguez replied, understanding that Morrison's institutional liabilities were operational assets when dealing with situations that conventional approaches couldn't address effectively. The conversation highlighted a fundamental contradiction in modern military thinking. The same qualities that made operators effective in extreme situations also made them unsuitable for routine operations that required adherence to established procedures and chain of command protocols. Morrison had been removed from operations because his success methods were too unpredictable. For institutional comfort, Chun pulled up Morrison's operational history, displaying mission summaries that documented consistent success in situations where conventional approaches had failed. His ability to adapt to changing tactical conditions and improvise solutions to unexpected problems was exactly what would be required for reconnaissance operations against facilities designed to defeat standard intelligence gathering methods. Morrison's current assignment to Training Command would provide perfect cover for temporary deployment, Rodriguez observed, noting that his administrative status would attract less attention than deploying active special operations personnel. His reassignment creates plausible deniability for operations that might require disavowal if political complications develop. Walsh processed the implications of utilizing an officer whose reliability was officially questioned, but whose capabilities were uniquely suited to the tactical requirements they faced. Morrison's disciplinary status actually enhanced his operational value by providing institutional distance from missions that could create diplomatic problems if they were discovered or went wrong. Draft preliminary operational parameters for single operator reconnaissance, Walsh ordered, accepting that conventional solutions were inadequate for the intelligence requirements they faced. Include assessment of Morrison's availability and current psychological status. The meeting concluded with understanding that they were considering options that violated established protocols while potentially providing the only viable method for gathering intelligence that could save American lives. Morrison's career destruction was positioning him perfectly for a mission that would require every tactical innovation and procedural violation that had made him unsuitable for routine operations. As the briefing room emptied, Chun continued studying satellite imagery that showed increasing activity around the mysterious facility. Whatever the North Koreans were planning was accelerating, and conventional intelligence methods were proving inadequate for gathering the information required to protect American personnel who might be facing imminent threats to their survival. And security. The clock was ticking on a crisis that most officials didn't even know existed, while the one person capable of addressing it sat in professional exile, waiting for a phone call that would transform his greatest weakness into their only hope. The emergency alert pierced through the Pentagon's Crisis Management Center at 0347 hours Eastern Standard Time. Colonel David Hayes rushed from his quarters, still buttoning his uniform as he processed the urgent communication that had dragged him from sleep into what appeared to be developing into a major international incident. The message was brief but chilling, confirmation that the North Korean facility contained not just the missing reconnaissance crew, but 75 American prisoners of war who were scheduled for public execution in 48 hours. The intelligence had come through back-channel sources that the CIA maintained for exactly these types of crisis situations. A North Korean intelligence officer, codenamed Phoenix, had risked his life to transmit detailed information about the facility's true purpose and the imminent threat facing American prisoners, who had been secretly accumulated over the past 18 months through various capture operations that had never been officially acknowledged. Phoenix's intelligence revealed that the facility served as a central processing center for American military personnel who possessed knowledge of strategic capabilities, operational procedures, and technological specifications that North Korean leadership considered essential for their military modernization programs. The prisoners had been subjected to months of enhanced interrogation designed to extract information that could compromise American military advantages throughout the Pacific Theater. General Patricia Sullivan stood at the center of the crisis management center, her expression reflecting the weight of decisions that could affect international relations and American lives in ways that political leadership would struggle to manage. Around her, staff officers worked frantically to verify Phoenix's intelligence while developing response options that might preserve American lives without creating diplomatic disasters that could destabilize the entire region. "Confirm the prisoner manifest," Sullivan ordered, knowing that the intelligence needed verification before committing resources to operations that could escalate into broader military conflicts if they went wrong or were discovered by international media outlets that might not understand the strategic necessities involved. Major Elizabeth Carter consulted classified databases while cross-referencing Phoenix's prisoner list with missing personnel reports from the past 18 months. The correlation was horrifying. 43 Navy SEALs, 17 Army Rangers, 12 Air Force pilots, and 3 CIA operatives who had been declared missing in action during various operations throughout Asia were confirmed to be alive and detained at the North Korean facility. Phoenix's manifest matches our missing personnel reports with 97% accuracy, Carter reported, her voice reflecting the professional control that masked personal horror at discovering that soldiers presumed dead were actually facing systematic torture in a facility that intelligence agencies had failed to identify until 3 days ago. The revelation meant that families had been grieving for loved ones who were actually suffering in captivity, while military leadership had written off their losses as acceptable casualties in ongoing operations that now appeared to have been compromised by intelligence failures and inadequate security protocols. Phoenix's intelligence included facility blueprints that revealed the sophisticated nature of North Korean detention operations. The underground complex extended 4 levels below ground, with specialized interrogation chambers, medical facilities for keeping prisoners alive during extended questioning sessions, and execution chambers that had been constructed for the public spectacle that North Korean leadership was planning. "The execution is scheduled for 48 hours from now," Sullivan stated, reading from Phoenix's latest transmission. "It will be broadcast internationally as a demonstration of North Korean military capabilities and American weakness. The prisoners will be presented as evidence that American military superiority is mythology rather than tactical reality." The political implications were staggering. Public execution of 75 American prisoners would create domestic pressure for military retaliation that could escalate into broader conflicts involving China and Russia, both of whom had strategic interests in maintaining North Korean stability as a buffer against American influence in the region. Colonel Hayes coordinated with Special Operations Command to assess immediate response capabilities, but his conversations revealed institutional limitations that made rapid intervention impossible through conventional military channels. Special Operations units required minimum planning timelines, extensive logistical support, and interagency coordination that couldn't be accomplished within the 48-hour deadline imposed by enemy execution schedules. Special Operations Command is requesting 72 hours minimum for mission planning and resource allocation, has reported, understanding that bureaucratic requirements were sentencing American prisoners to death while planners debated acceptable risk parameters and political clearance procedures. The disconnect between institutional procedures and tactical realities was creating a situation where American military capabilities were being defeated by administrative requirements that prioritized risk management over mission accomplishment. Soldiers were dying because bureaucratic processes couldn't adapt to crisis timelines that demanded immediate action. General Sullivan studied satellite imagery of the facility while processing the tactical challenges that any rescue operation would face. The complex was situated in mountainous terrain that provided natural defensive advantages while being surrounded by military installations that could respond rapidly to any American intervention attempt. Conventional assault approaches would require overwhelming force that wasn't available within the operational timeline. What about airstrikes? Suggested Colonel Mitchell from the Air Operations Center, referring to precision bombing that could eliminate the facility and its prisoners simultaneously. We could deny North Korea their propaganda victory while preventing compromise of classified information that the prisoners might have revealed under interrogation. The suggestion highlighted the cold calculus that sometimes characterized military decision-making when strategic considerations outweighed individual lives. Destroying the facility would eliminate the political embarrassment of public executions, but it would also murder 75 American prisoners whose families believed they were already dead. That's not an option, Sullivan replied firmly, understanding that military effectiveness couldn't be measured solely through strategic advantage when American lives could still be preserved through alternative approaches that institutional thinking might not have considered. Phoenix's intelligence included detailed information about facility, security protocols, and guard rotations that revealed vulnerabilities in North Korean defensive arrangements. The facility had been designed to prevent external assault by conventional forces, but it wasn't prepared for infiltration by individual operators who could exploit weaknesses in perimeter, security, and internal surveillance systems. Single operator insertion might be possible during shift changes that occur at 0200 hours local time, Carter observed, studying guard rotation schedules that Phoenix had provided along with architectural blueprints. But extraction of 75 prisoners would require coordination that exceeds individual capabilities. The tactical analysis revealed fundamental challenges that conventional military thinking couldn't address effectively. Rescuing 75 prisoners from a heavily fortified facility required innovative approaches that combined infiltration, expertise with mass extraction capabilities that no single operator could provide independently. We need someone who can adapt mission parameters in real time, Sullivan stated, recognizing that conventional operations failed when tactical situations demanded flexibility that established procedures couldn't provide. Someone who can improvise solutions to problems that planning staff can't anticipate. The conversation inevitably returned to Jack Morrison, whose name had surfaced repeatedly during discussions of unconventional operations that required individual initiative and tactical innovation. His recent disciplinary problems were the result of exactly the kind of independent thinking that this situation would demand from any operator who hoped to succeed against impossible odds. Morrison is currently assigned to Training Command following his disciplinary hearing, Hayes noted, consulting personnel files that documented his reassignment to administrative duties. His security clearance has been downgraded, and he's been classified as unsuitable for operational assignments. But he's the only operator with demonstrated capabilities for this type of mission, Carter added, reviewing Morrison's operational history that showed consistent success in situations where conventional approaches had failed. His psychological profile indicates exactly the kind of tactical flexibility that would be required for prisoner extraction under these conditions. General Sullivan processed the institutional irony of needing an officer whose reliability was officially questioned, but whose capabilities were uniquely suited to the tactical requirements they faced. Morrison's career destruction had positioned him perfectly for a mission that would require every protocol violation and tactical innovation that had made him unsuitable for routine operations. Phoenix's intelligence indicates that facility security will be enhanced beginning tomorrow morning, Sullivan noted, studying enemy preparations that would make infiltration increasingly difficult as North Korean authorities anticipated potential rescue attempts. If we're going to act, it has to be tonight. The timeline eliminated conventional planning processes and interagency coordination, requirements that normally preceded special operations. Any mission would have to be approved and executed within hours rather than weeks, demanding decision-making authority that could bypass bureaucratic procedures that might delay action until American prisoners were beyond rescue. Morrison would have to operate without official authorization, Hayes warned, understanding that unauthorized operations created legal and political complications that could affect careers and institutional credibility if they were discovered or went wrong. His mission would require plausible deniability that protects institutional interests. The legal framework for deniable operations existed in bureaucratic gray areas where individual initiative could be retroactively approved or disavowed, depending on results and political requirements. Morrison's disciplinary status actually enhanced his operational value by providing institutional distance from missions that might require abandonment if diplomatic problems developed. Contact Morrison immediately, Sullivan ordered, accepting that conventional solutions were inadequate for the crisis they faced. Brief him on the situation and assess his willingness to undertake unauthorized operations that could save American lives. The decision represented institutional acknowledgement that bureaucratic procedures were inadequate for tactical situations that demanded immediate action and individual initiative. Morrison's career destruction was being transformed into an operational opportunity that could preserve lives that conventional military capabilities couldn't protect. What about extraction support? Carter asked, knowing that Morrison couldn't evacuate 75 prisoners without substantial assistance that would require official coordination and resource allocation. He'll need helicopter assets and medical support that can't be provided through unofficial channels. We'll position assets for emergency response while maintaining official ignorance of Morrison's activities, Sullivan replied, developing operational concepts that balanced institutional protection with tactical support. If his mission succeeds, we'll provide extraction capabilities. If it fails, we'll deny knowledge of his activities. The approach reflected military pragmatism that prioritized results over procedural compliance when American lives were at stake. Morrison would operate without official support, while knowing that success would bring retroactive authorization and failure would bring complete abandonment by the institution he was risking his life to serve. Communications personnel established encrypted contact with Morrison's current location at Fort Bragg, where he was conducting routine training exercises that had become mind-numbing routine following his reassignment from operational duties. The phone call that would change his life and potentially save 75 American prisoners was being placed from the Pentagon's most secure communication facility, as the Crisis Management Center continued its frantic coordination efforts. Phoenix transmitted his final intelligence update before going silent to avoid detection by North Korean counterintelligence operations. His last message contained execution protocols that revealed North Korean intentions to make American deaths as psychologically devastating as possible through torture and humiliation that would be broadcast globally. The 48-hour countdown had begun, and conventional military capabilities were proving inadequate for protecting American lives that could only be saved through individual initiative and tactical innovation that institutional authorities had systematically discouraged. Jack Morrison's phone was about to ring with an opportunity to transform his greatest professional liability into his country's most desperate hope. Time was running out, and everything depended on a man they had declared unfit for service, making the impossible choice to risk everything for soldiers he had never met, in a country that wouldn't acknowledge his existence if the mission went wrong. The point of no return had arrived, and only one person possessed the capabilities and the willingness to cross it. The call came at 0412 hours while Jack Morrison was reviewing training schedules for the next day's basic combat exercises. His secure phone displayed an encrypted number that shouldn't have existed according to his current security clearance level. The voice on the other end belonged to someone he hadn't spoken to in 3 months, someone whose authority had contributed to his professional exile from operational assignments. "Jack, this is Colonel Hayes. I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you, and understand that this conversation never happened." The briefing lasted 18 minutes and contained information that transformed Jack's understanding of his current situation from administrative punishment to strategic positioning. 75 American prisoners were facing execution in 46 hours at a facility that conventional military assets couldn't reach within the operational timeline. The mission parameters were impossible according to established doctrine, which made Jack the only viable option for an operation that wouldn't officially exist. "You're telling me to infiltrate a hardened North Korean facility, extract 75 prisoners, and get them to safety without any official support or backup," Jack summarized, processing tactical requirements that exceeded anything he had attempted during 8 years of special operations service. "That's exactly what I'm telling you," Hayes confirmed. "And if you're captured or killed, the United States government will deny all knowledge of your activities. Your family will be told you died during a training accident at Fort Bragg." The conversation ended with coordinates for a supply cache that had been positioned 12 hours earlier at an abandoned airfield in South Korea. Transportation would be provided through civilian contractors who specialized in plausible deniability and had no official connection to American military operations. Jack had 4 hours to decide whether to undertake a mission that could save American lives or destroy what remained of his military career. He didn't need 4 hours. The decision was made the moment Hayes mentioned American prisoners facing execution while conventional forces debated bureaucratic procedures. Jack's tactical assessment of the mission parameters revealed challenges that would require every innovation and protocol violation that had resulted in his removal from active duty, techniques that were about to be transformed from career-ending liabilities into life-saving assets. The supply cache was located in a concrete bunker that had been constructed during the Korean War and subsequently forgotten by military planners who focused on modern facilities rather than historical infrastructure. Jack's civilian transport dropped him at the coordinates without conversation or identification exchange, maintaining operational security through professional anonymity that protected all parties from complications that might arise if the mission was discovered. Inside the bunker, he found equipment that had been selected specifically for his operational preferences and tactical requirements. The gear reflected intimate knowledge of his mission history and personal modifications that he had developed through years of unconventional operations. Someone had studied his equipment preferences and psychological profile to provide exactly what he would need for infiltration and extraction operations. Against impossible odds, the rifle was a custom-built precision instrument zeroed for his shooting style and equipped with specialized ammunition designed for maximum effectiveness at extended ranges. Night vision equipment included experimental technology that wasn't officially available to special operations units, providing capabilities that would be essential for movement through terrain where conventional equipment would be inadequate. Communication devices operated on frequencies that existed outside normal military channels. enabling contact with support elements while maintaining encryption that prevented enemy interception or official monitoring by American authorities who needed plausible deniability about unauthorized operations. The equipment package included medical supplies sufficient for treating multiple trauma casualties during extended operations without external support. Most importantly, the cache contained detailed intelligence about the target facility that went far beyond what Phoenix had been able to provide through back-channel communications. Architectural blueprints revealed structural weaknesses that could be exploited for both infiltration and extraction operations, while guard rotation schedules provided windows of opportunity for movement through areas that were normally under constant surveillance. The intelligence package included prisoner manifest information that identified specific individuals by name, rank, and detention location within the facility. Jack studied photographs and service records of men who had been declared killed in action, while actually suffering months of interrogation and torture in cells that their families would never know existed. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, a Navy SEAL sniper who had been captured during a reconnaissance mission 6 months earlier, was being held in Section C7, along with 12 other Special Operations personnel who possessed knowledge of classified operational procedures. Staff Sergeant Michael Chun, an Army Ranger explosives expert, was detained in Section B3 with other prisoners who had been targeted for their technical knowledge of American military equipment and tactics. Each prisoner represented capabilities that enemy interrogators were systematically extracting through methods that violated every international law governing treatment of military personnel. Their knowledge was being used to develop countermeasures against American military advantages, while their eventual execution would demonstrate North Korean willingness to escalate conflicts beyond conventional diplomatic boundaries. Jack's mission planning utilized terrain analysis that revealed infiltration routes through mountain approaches that weren't covered by perimeter security systems, designed to prevent conventional assault operations. The facility's defensive arrangements were sophisticated, but focused on external threats rather than individual infiltration by operators with specialized mountain warfare training. The approach would require 12 hours of movement through terrain that challenged physical endurance while maintaining tactical awareness of enemy patrol patterns and electronic surveillance systems. Jack's route selection balanced concealment requirements against time constraints imposed by prisoner execution schedules that couldn't be delayed or modified through diplomatic intervention. His equipment load was carefully calculated to provide essential capabilities while maintaining mobility through difficult terrain that would test physical conditioning. Despite months of administrative duty that had reduced his operational fitness levels, every item was selected for maximum utility while minimizing weight that could compromise movement speed or tactical flexibility. During phases of the mission that would require rapid adaptation to changing circumstances, the infiltration began at 2,100 hours local time, utilizing weather conditions that provided natural concealment while creating additional challenges for movement through mountain terrain where visibility was reduced and footing was treacherous. Jack's approach techniques emphasized stealth over speed, recognizing that detection would result in mission failure, regardless of how quickly he could reach the facility perimeter. His movement through the initial approach phase required crossing terrain that was monitored by electronic sensors designed to detect conventional military vehicles and large troop movements. Individual infiltration by operators with specialized training could exploit gaps in coverage that existed because North Korean planners hadn't anticipated single-person operations against heavily defended facilities. Navigation relied on traditional techniques that didn't require electronic equipment vulnerable to enemy detection or interference from atmospheric conditions that could compromise GPS accuracy in mountainous terrain. Jack's route followed ridgelines that provided natural concealment while avoiding valleys where enemy forces might establish observation posts or patrol bases. The physical demands of mountain movement while carrying full operational equipment. Tested endurance levels that had been maintained through individual training during months of administrative assignments. Jack's conditioning programs had emphasized exactly the type of sustained effort that would be required for infiltration operations, maintaining capabilities that institutional authorities had declared unnecessary for training command duties. Enemy activity in the area became evident through subtle indicators that revealed patrol patterns and surveillance procedures designed to prevent exactly the type of operation Jack was conducting. His ability to recognize and interpret these signs allowed movement through areas that were under observation while avoiding detection by personnel who lacked training in identifying individual infiltrators. Security measures around the facility perimeter reflected North Korean understanding that American rescue attempts were possible despite diplomatic denials and official statements about accepting prisoner losses. Guard rotations had been intensified. Electronic surveillance systems had been upgraded, and rapid reaction forces had been positioned to respond to incursions that might attempt prisoner extraction. Jack's reconnaissance of the facility perimeter revealed defensive arrangements that exceeded intelligence estimates about North Korean security capabilities. The installation was protected by multiple layers of detection systems that created overlapping fields of coverage, designed to identify and track intruders from initial approach through penetration attempts. His infiltration plan exploited weaknesses in perimeter security that occurred during shift changes, when guard attention was focused on transition procedures rather than external surveillance. The timing window was narrow, requiring precise coordination between movement phases and security. Rotation schedules that had been observed through extended reconnaissance. Penetration of the facility perimeter required techniques that Jack had developed during previous operations in denied territory, methods that emphasized patience and precision over speed or force. His approach utilized natural concealment features while exploiting blind spots in electronic surveillance coverage that existed because security planners had focused on conventional threats rather than individual infiltration. The facility's internal layout corresponded to intelligence blueprints with modifications that revealed recent security enhancements designed to prevent prisoner escape attempts or rescue operations. Jack's movement through interior spaces required constant adaptation to surveillance systems and guard procedures that had been upgraded since the intelligence was gathered. His location of the first prisoner detention area confirmed intelligence estimates about facility organization while revealing security measures that would complicate extraction operations. The prisoners were held in individual cells that prevented communication and coordination, while guard procedures ensured constant surveillance that would detect unauthorized access attempts. Contact with the first group of prisoners required careful timing to avoid guard patrols while establishing communication that could coordinate extraction procedures without alerting facility security to rescue operations. Jack's approach emphasized stealth and rapid communication over elaborate coordination that might be detected by surveillance systems. Monitoring prisoner activities, Lieutenant Commander Mitchell's reaction to Jack's appearance in her cell reflected both disbelief and professional recognition that rescue operations were possible despite months of captivity that had convinced her that extraction was impossible. Her tactical awareness remained intact despite prolonged detention, enabling rapid coordination of escape procedures with minimal explanation or preparation time. "How many others are you extracting?" she whispered, understanding that individual rescue was less likely than mass evacuation operations that would require extensive coordination and significant tactical risk. "All 75, Jack replied, beginning to implement procedures that would transform impossible rescue parameters into systematic extraction of every American prisoner in the facility. The mission was entering its most critical phase, where individual infiltration would transition to mass evacuation requiring tactical innovation. that no training program had ever anticipated or institutional authority had ever authorized. Success would depend on improvised solutions to problems that planning staff couldn't have imagined, executed by an operator whose career had been destroyed for demonstrating exactly these capabilities: the extraction of 75 prisoners from a facility designed to be impenetrable required tactical innovation that existed outside every military manual Jack had ever studied. His initial reconnaissance revealed that conventional evacuation procedures were impossible. The prisoners were distributed across 4 underground levels, separated by security checkpoints that required electronic authorization and monitored by surveillance systems that tracked movement throughout the complex. Working with Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, who had spent 6 months memorizing facility routines and guard behaviors, Jack developed an extraction sequence that would systematically neutralize security systems while coordinating prisoner movement through corridors that weren't designed for mass evacuation. The plan required precise timing and flawless execution, with no margin for error or unexpected complications. The guard stations reset their electronic locks every 47 minutes, Mitchell whispered, sharing intelligence she had gathered through months of careful observation. But there's a 90-second window during the reset cycle when manual override is possible if you know the mechanical backup procedures. Her information revealed vulnerabilities that facility designers hadn't anticipated when they created security systems that emphasized technological sophistication over operational flexibility. The electronic locks were intended to prevent prisoner escape attempts, but they could be exploited by someone with technical knowledge and precise timing. Jack's technical background included electronic systems, training that most special operations personnel lacked, capabilities that had been developed through unauthorized modifications to standard equipment during previous deployments. His understanding of security system architecture allowed identification of weakness points that could be systematically exploited to create windows of opportunity for prisoner movement. The first phase required disabling surveillance cameras in Section C without triggering automatic alerts that would bring guard reinforcements before the extraction could begin. Jack utilized electronic warfare techniques that had been classified as unauthorized during his disciplinary hearing, methods that institutional authorities had declared too aggressive for routine operations. His electromagnetic pulse device temporarily disabled camera systems while creating electronic signatures that appeared to be routine equipment malfunctions rather than deliberate sabotage. The technique provided 12 minutes of surveillance blackout that would enable prisoner extraction from the first detention level without detection by security monitoring stations. Staff Sergeant Chun's cell contained 17 Army Rangers who had maintained unit cohesion despite months of individual detention, designed to break psychological bonds that enabled coordinated resistance to interrogation. Their immediate readiness to follow extraction procedures demonstrated the training and discipline that had made them valuable intelligence targets for enemy interrogators. "We've been planning breakout scenarios since the second week," Chun reported quietly as Jack began unlocking cell doors using electronic bypass techniques. "We know every guard rotation, every procedural weakness, every escape route that leads to dead ends or security traps." The Rangers' preparation accelerated extraction procedures while providing tactical intelligence that Jack's reconnaissance couldn't have gathered independently. Their knowledge of facility operations filled critical gaps in his understanding of internal security measures and guard response procedures. The second detention level presented additional challenges because it housed Navy SEALs who had been subjected to enhanced interrogation designed to extract information about underwater demolition techniques and coastal infiltration procedures. Their physical condition reflected months of systematic abuse, but their tactical awareness remained intact. Despite attempts to break their operational capabilities, Petty Officer Marcus Thompson could barely walk due to leg injuries sustained. During interrogation, but his knowledge of explosive ordnance disposal proved essential when Jack discovered that facility exits were protected by motion-sensitive charges designed to eliminate escapees and prevent intelligence compromise. Thompson's expertise enabled safe passage through areas that would have been fatal without his technical knowledge. "They've wired the main corridors with proximity explosives," Thompson warned, pointing out detection devices that were nearly invisible in the dim lighting. "But the charges are configured for multiple personnel. Single operators can move through the detection field without triggering detonation." His analysis revealed security measures that were designed to prevent mass escape attempts, but could be exploited by individual movement techniques that dispersed prisoner evacuation across multiple routes and time intervals. The extraction would require precise choreography that kept prisoner groups below detonation thresholds while maintaining coordination that prevented personnel from becoming separated or lost. The third level housed Air Force pilots whose interrogation had focused on aircraft capabilities, navigation systems, and electronic warfare procedures that enemy forces needed to counter American air superiority. Captain Lisa Rodriguez retained detailed knowledge of facility communication systems that she had observed during transport between interrogation sessions and medical treatment areas. Their communication center is located on the second sublevel, Rodriguez reported as Jack worked to disable electronic restraints that kept high-value prisoners immobilized. It's operated by a skeleton crew during night shifts, and the primary RADIO equipment isn't hardened against electromagnetic interference. Her intelligence provided the key to coordinating extraction with external support elements while preventing facility personnel from requesting reinforcements that could arrive before prisoner evacuation was completed. Jack's communication disruption plan would isolate the facility from outside contact while maintaining his own encrypted links to support elements positioned across the border. The CIA operatives on the fourth level had been subjected to the most intensive interrogation because their knowledge included intelligence gathering techniques, foreign contact procedures, and classified information about American espionage operations throughout Asia. Their extraction required additional security measures because enemy forces would prioritize their recapture over other prisoners who possessed less sensitive information. Agent Patricia Hawkins had maintained mental maps of facility ventilation systems that provided alternative movement routes, avoiding heavily monitored corridors where prisoner groups might be detected by roving patrols. Her knowledge of the facility's architectural weaknesses enabled evacuation procedures that utilized maintenance areas and utility passages that weren't covered by standard security systems. The ventilation shafts connect to an external intake system that's only guarded during shift changes, Hawkins explained as Jack began implementing extraction procedures that would move prisoners through routes that facility designers hadn't considered vulnerable to exploitation. "We can reach the perimeter through maintenance areas that aren't included in patrol schedules." The coordinate extraction of 75 prisoners required splitting them into groups that could move independently while maintaining communication that enabled regrouping at predetermined rally points outside the facility perimeter. Jack's coordination procedures utilized hand signals and timing sequences that minimized radio communication while ensuring that no prisoner groups became separated or confused during movement through unfamiliar terrain. Emergency complications arose when guard rotation schedules changed unexpectedly, forcing rapid adaptation of extraction timing that threatened to expose prisoner movement during periods when corridor surveillance was active. Jack's ability to modify plans in real time while maintaining coordination among multiple prisoner groups demonstrated the tactical flexibility that institutional authorities had declared unreliable. His solution involved creating diversions that drew guard attention away from extraction routes, while prisoner groups moved through alternative passages that required physical capabilities that had been maintained. Despite months of detention and abuse, The psychological resilience that had enabled survival during prolonged captivity now provided the determination necessary for escape through physically demanding routes. The facility's alarm systems activated when automatic sensors detected movement patterns that exceeded normal parameters for authorized personnel during night shift operations. Jack's contingency planning had anticipated security alerts and included procedures for continuing extraction operations, while facility personnel implemented lockdown procedures designed to prevent unauthorized access or egress. His electromagnetic warfare techniques disabled automated security systems, while creating electrical failures that appeared to be infrastructure problems rather than deliberate sabotage. The systematic failure of multiple systems overwhelmed facility maintenance capabilities while providing cover for continued prisoner movement through corridors that were temporarily unmonitored. The final extraction phase required coordinating 75 individuals through perimeter defenses while maintaining tactical formation that could respond to enemy contact if facility security forces discovered the escape before all prisoners reached safety beyond the surveillance perimeter. Jack's leadership during this critical phase demonstrated capabilities that transcended individual technical skills, enabling group coordination under extreme pressure that tested everyone's physical and psychological limits. Success depended on every prisoner maintaining discipline and tactical awareness while moving through terrain that challenged physical capabilities that had been weakened by months of captivity and abuse. Their determination to reach freedom provided motivation that overcame physical limitations, while their military training enabled coordinated movement despite exhaustion and injuries that would have incapacitated civilian personnel. As the first prisoner groups reached the perimeter extraction point, Jack remained inside the facility to ensure that no one was left behind, maintaining his commitment to complete mission success rather than accepting partial evacuation that would abandon wounded or slower prisoners to certain execution. His refusal to leave until every American was accounted for demonstrated the leadership principles that institutional authorities had failed to recognize or value appropriately. The perimeter extraction point lay 3 kilometers beyond the facility's outer security fence, positioned in a valley that provided natural concealment while offering multiple escape routes if North Korean forces discovered the rescue operation before helicopter extraction could be completed. 73 American prisoners had successfully reached the rally point, but 2 critically wounded SEALs remained trapped in the facility's medical wing, unable to move without assistance that would compromise the entire group's escape timeline. Jack faced the defining moment of his military career: abandon 2 dying soldiers to save 73 others, or risk everyone's lives attempting a rescue that violated every principle of tactical risk management he had ever been taught. The decision took him exactly 3 seconds to make, demonstrating the moral certainty that institutional authorities had mistaken for dangerous insubordination. "Mitchell, take command of the extraction group," Jack ordered, handing her the encrypted radio that would coordinate helicopter pickup. "If I'm not back in 30 minutes, proceed with evacuation. Those are 73 lives that can't be risked for 2 who might already be beyond saving." Lieutenant Commander Mitchell understood the tactical mathematics while recognizing the leadership principle that drove Jack's decision. Military effectiveness couldn't be measured solely through numerical advantage when individual soldiers' lives represented moral obligations that transcended strategic calculations. Her expression reflected both professional agreement with the tactical necessity and personal admiration for leadership that refused to abandon wounded personnel. The return infiltration into a facility that was now on full alert required techniques that pushed stealth capabilities beyond anything Jack had attempted during 8 years of special operations. Emergency lighting had been activated throughout the complex, guard patrols had been tripled, and electronic surveillance systems had been switched to maximum sensitivity settings that could detect movement that previously would have gone unnoticed. His Approach through perimeter defenses utilized diversions that he had prepared during the initial extraction. Explosive charges that created false breach points while drawing security forces away from his actual infiltration route. The deceptions were timed to provide maximum confusion while preserving escape routes that would be essential for extracting the wounded. SEALs who couldn't move independently through difficult terrain. Inside the facility, emergency procedures had transformed familiar corridors into death traps where automated weapon systems had been activated and motion sensors had been recalibrated to eliminate anything that moved without proper authorization codes. Jack's movement through these areas required constant adaptation to security measures that had been implemented specifically to prevent exactly what he was attempting. The medical wing housed Petty Officer David Kim and Chief Petty Officer Robert Martinez, both suffering from injuries that had been deliberately inflicted during interrogation sessions, designed to extract information about underwater demolition techniques. Their conditions were critical but potentially survivable if they could receive trauma care within the next few hours, creating a window of opportunity that was rapidly closing as their blood loss continued. "Can you move if I support your weight?" Jack asked Kim, whose leg had been systematically broken during interrogation but who retained upper body strength that might enable assisted movement through evacuation routes that required climbing and crawling through confined spaces. Kim's response demonstrated the determination had enabled survival through months of torture designed to break psychological resistance. "I can move as far as necessary to get out of this place," he confirmed, accepting pain medication from Jack's medical supplies that would enable temporary mobility despite injuries that would normally require complete immobilization. Martinez's condition was more serious, with internal injuries that required constant medical attention to prevent fatal complications. His extraction would require improvised medical techniques that Jack had learned during combat operations where formal medical support wasn't available. Procedures that could stabilize trauma patients during transport but couldn't address underlying damage that required surgical intervention. The movement of 2 critically wounded prisoners through a facility on maximum alert required tactical innovation that combined medical support with combat techniques in ways that no training program had ever anticipated. Jack's modifications to standard evacuation procedures demonstrated the creative problem-solving that institutional authorities had declared too unpredictable for routine operations. His route selection utilized maintenance tunnels that connected the medical wing to external utility systems, passages that weren't included in standard security coverage because facility planners hadn't anticipated their use for escape purposes. The confined spaces were challenging for healthy personnel and nearly impossible for wounded individuals who required assistance for every movement. Emergency complications arose when facility security forces discovered evidence of the mass prisoner extraction and began systematic searches of areas that hadn't been checked during routine security sweeps. Their procedures were thorough and methodical, covering every possible hiding place or escape route that unauthorized personnel might utilize to avoid detection. Jack's concealment techniques protected the wounded SEALs while security teams searched areas that were within meters of their position. His ability to remain undetected while supporting 2 injured personnel demonstrated tactical skills that had been developed through years of operations in environments where discovery meant capture or death. The breakthrough came when Jack identified a ventilation system that connected to the facility's central air processing plant, a route that would enable movement to the perimeter without using corridors that were under constant surveillance. The passage required crawling through spaces that were barely large enough for single personnel, while supporting wounded individuals who couldn't move independently. Kim's determination enabled him to navigate the confined passages despite injuries that created constant pain, while Martinez required continuous medical support to prevent shock that could be fatal during physical exertion that his body wasn't capable of sustaining. Jack's medical training provided life-saving Interventions that kept both men conscious and mobile despite trauma that would have killed personnel lacking immediate care. The external air processing plant was located 50 meters from the perimeter fence, close enough to the extraction rally point that wounded personnel could be transported without exposing the main prisoner group to additional risks. Jack's timing calculations indicated that helicopter extraction would commence in 12 minutes, creating a narrow window for reaching safety before North Korean reinforcements arrived from nearby military installations. The final movement phase required crossing open ground while supporting 2 wounded personnel who couldn't move rapidly or maintain concealment that would prevent detection by security forces that were systematically searching the perimeter area. Jack's diversionary tactics created false targets that drew attention away from their actual movement route, while providing suppressive fire that enabled protected movement across exposed terrain. His marksmanship eliminated security personnel who detected their movement while conserving ammunition through precision shooting that neutralized specific threats without alerting additional forces to their location. The engagement was brief but decisive, demonstrating tactical effectiveness that had been achieved through years of training that emphasized accuracy over volume of fire. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell's leadership of the main extraction group had maintained discipline and tactical organization despite the stress of waiting in hostile territory, while Jack attempted a rescue that most personnel would have considered impossible. Her coordination with incoming helicopter assets ensured that evacuation procedures were ready to commence immediately upon arrival of the final personnel. The helicopter insertion occurred exactly on schedule, with aircraft approaching through terrain that provided concealment while enabling rapid extraction of personnel who had been positioned for immediate evacuation. The pilots demonstrated exceptional skill in landing on terrain that wasn't designed for aircraft operations, accepting risks that exceeded standard safety protocols to ensure mission success. Medical personnel aboard the helicopters provided immediate trauma care for wounded prisoners whose conditions required intervention that field medical supplies couldn't address effectively. Their professional competence transformed potential fatalities into survivable injuries through techniques that had been developed specifically for combat casualty care during extended operations. The evacuation sequence was completed in 17 minutes, with all 75 American prisoners successfully extracted from North Korean territory before enemy reinforcements could respond to the facility's emergency alerts. Jack's refusal to abandon wounded personnel had transformed a successful rescue into a complete mission accomplishment that preserved every American life that had been scheduled for execution. As the helicopters cleared North Korean airspace, Jack processed the realization that his career-ending tactical innovations had enabled the largest prisoner rescue in modern military history. The same qualities that institutional authorities had declared unsuitable for military service had proven essential for accomplishing missions that conventional approaches couldn't have completed successfully. The radio message from Colonel Hayes confirmed what Jack already understood: mission accomplished. All personnel accounted for. Welcome back to operational status. His professional exile was ending, but more importantly, 75 American families would be receiving phone calls that their loved ones were coming home alive, rather than memorial services for soldiers who had died in captivity. The impossible had become possible through individual initiative and tactical innovation that transcended institutional limitations, proving that military effectiveness sometimes required exactly the qualities that bureaucratic thinking sought to eliminate from modern warfare. The debriefing room at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany held an atmosphere of controlled amazement as intelligence officials processed after-action reports that documented the successful extraction of 75 American prisoners from a facility that conventional military doctrine had declared impossible to penetrate. Jack Morrison sat across from a panel of senior officers whose expressions ranged from professional admiration to institutional discomfort with methods that had succeeded precisely because they violated established protocols. Director Walsh from the CIA reviewed mission documentation that would never appear in official records, classified reports that acknowledged tactical innovations while carefully avoiding detailed examination of unauthorized techniques that had enabled mission success. The bureaucratic challenge was recognizing exceptional achievement while maintaining institutional authority over operations that might set precedents for individual initiative that could undermine command structure discipline. Captain Morrison, your mission report indicates that you modified extraction procedures 17 times during the operation, Colonel Blake stated, reading from documentation that revealed constant adaptation to changing tactical situations. Standard Special Operations Doctrine emphasizes pre-planned contingencies, rather than real-time improvisation that might compromise mission coordination. Jack's response reflected understanding that his tactical flexibility was being questioned, not because it had failed, but because it had succeeded in ways that institutional thinking couldn't replicate or control through established procedures. The enemy doesn't follow our operational plans, ma'am. Mission success required adapting to tactical realities that reconnaissance couldn't have anticipated. The medical reports from Landstuhl's Trauma Center provided stark evidence of what the 75 rescued prisoners had endured during months of systematic torture designed to extract classified information about American military capabilities. Staff Sergeant Michael Chun had sustained injuries that would require 18 months of rehabilitation, while Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell needed reconstructive surgery for damage inflicted during interrogation sessions that violated every international law governing prisoner treatment. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, Landstuhl's chief trauma surgeon, briefed the panel on medical conditions that revealed the sophisticated nature of North Korean interrogation techniques. The injuries were systematically inflicted to maximize psychological pressure while maintaining prisoner viability for extended questioning periods, she reported, her professional demeanor barely concealing anger at the evidence of deliberate torture that had been designed to break psychological resistance through calculated infliction of pain. The prisoner's medical evaluations documented not only physical trauma, but psychological damage that would require years of treatment to address. Chief Petty Officer Robert Martinez, whose internal injuries had nearly proven fatal during extraction, was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder that made normal conversation difficult, while Petty Officer David Kim experienced recurring nightmares about interrogation sessions that had lasted for days without interruption. What these men and women endured would have broken most people within weeks. Dr. Harper continued, reviewing psychological assessments that revealed remarkable resilience among personnel who had maintained military discipline despite months of abuse designed to destroy their psychological foundation. Their survival is a testament to training and unit cohesion that enabled resistance to techniques specifically designed to eliminate both. Agent Patricia Hawkins, one of the CIA operatives who had been held in the facility's most secure section, provided intelligence assessments that revealed the scope of North Korean efforts to extract American military secrets through systematic interrogation of captured personnel. Her debriefing sessions with intelligence analysts documented enemy capabilities that exceeded previous estimates about their intelligence gathering operations and technical sophistication. They knew details about our operational procedures that could only have been obtained through months of systematic interrogation, Hawkins reported, describing enemy knowledge of American military capabilities that suggested successful extraction of classified information from prisoners who had been captured during various operations throughout the Pacific Theater. Their questions were technically sophisticated and strategically focused, indicating professional intelligence operations rather than routine prisoner abuse. The strategic implications of North Korean intelligence gathering were significant, enough to require immediate changes to American operational procedures throughout Asia, communication protocols. Equipment specifications and tactical procedures that had been compromised through prisoner interrogation needed to be modified to prevent enemy exploitation of information that could affect ongoing operations and future mission planning. General Patricia Sullivan arrived at Landstuhl to personally conduct classified briefings with rescued personnel whose knowledge included sensitive information about special operations capabilities and strategic planning that enemy interrogators had systematically targeted. Her presence indicated institutional recognition that the prisoner rescue had prevented intelligence compromises that could have affected American military effectiveness throughout the region. Your extraction prevented a catastrophic intelligence breach that would have compromised operations for years, Sullivan informed Jack during a private meeting that acknowledged mission success while carefully avoiding official recognition that might create precedents for unauthorized operations. The information those prisoners possessed would have given North Korea decisive advantages in any future conflict. The conversation highlighted institutional appreciation for mission results, while maintaining bureaucratic distance from methods that had violated numerous regulations and safety protocols. Sullivan's assessment was delivered with professional precision that recognized tactical effectiveness while preserving institutional authority over operational decisions that affected strategic planning and political considerations. Jack's reassignment to operational status was processed through administrative channels that avoided publicity, while restoring security clearances and operational authorities that had been revoked following his disciplinary hearing. The bureaucratic machinery that had destroyed his career was now working to restore capabilities that recent events had proven essential for missions that conventional approaches couldn't accomplish. Your personnel file will reflect successful completion of a classified training exercise, Colonel Hayes explained during an administrative meeting that established official cover stories for operations that couldn't be acknowledged through normal channels. The details of your actual activities will remain compartmentalized at levels that protect operational security and political interests. The institutional approach to recognizing exceptional achievement reflected military pragmatism that balanced individual accomplishment against organizational requirements for maintaining command authority and regulatory compliance. Jack's success was being acknowledged through informal channels while official records maintained fiction that preserved institutional credibility and avoided political complications. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell's recovery at Landstuhl enabled her to provide detailed tactical assessments of North Korean facility operations and security procedures that would influence future intelligence gathering and rescue planning. Her professional analysis of enemy capabilities during months of captivity provided information that CONVENTIONEL intelligence methods couldn't have obtained through external surveillance or electronic monitoring. Their operational security was sophisticated but focused on preventing conventional military assault rather than individual infiltration. She reported during intelligence briefings that documented facility vulnerabilities and defensive arrangements. Single operator techniques could exploit weaknesses that wouldn't be available to larger units, requiring extensive logistical support and coordination. Her tactical recommendations emphasized the importance of individual operator capabilities and unconventional approaches for situations where conventional military doctrine provided inadequate solutions to complex tactical problems. The lessons learned from her captivity and rescue would influence special operations, training and operational planning in ways that institutional authorities were still processing. Staff Sergeant Chun's rehabilitation program included debriefing sessions that documented North Korean interrogation techniques and psychological warfare methods that had been employed against American prisoners. His professional analysis of enemy capabilities provided intelligence that would be essential for training personnel who might face similar situations during future operations in contested territories. They understood American military psychology better than our own training programs anticipated. Chun observed during classified briefings that revealed enemy knowledge of military culture and individual psychological vulnerabilities. Their interrogation methods were specifically designed to exploit weaknesses that standard resistance training doesn't address effectively. The intelligence gathered from rescued prisoners would require fundamental changes to survival, evasion, resistance, and escape training programs that hadn't been updated to address sophisticated psychological warfare techniques that modern enemies were employing against captured American personnel. The lessons learned would influence military training and operational procedures in ways that could prevent future intelligence compromises. Captain Lisa Rodriguez's debriefing provided technical intelligence about North Korean communication systems and electronic warfare capabilities that exceeded previous assessments of their technological sophistication. Her observations during captivity revealed enemy capabilities that conventional intelligence gathering hadn't identified, information that would influence American electronic warfare planning and equipment development. Their technical capabilities were more advanced than our intelligence estimates suggested. Rodriguez reported during classified technical briefings that documented enemy equipment and procedures. They possessed electronic warfare systems that could interfere with American communication and navigation equipment in ways that our countermeasures weren't designed to address. Her intelligence would require modifications to American military equipment and procedures to address vulnerabilities that enemy forces had demonstrated during her captivity. The technical lessons learned would influence research and development programs that affected military capabilities throughout the Pacific Theater and other regions where similar threats might be encountered. The families of rescued prisoners received notification through military channels that carefully balanced reunion celebrations with operational security requirements that prevented public acknowledgement of rescue operations. Parents, spouses, and children who had grieved for loved ones presumed dead were suddenly faced with joyous reunions that couldn't be shared publicly due to classification requirements that protected operational methods and political interests. Mrs. Janet Chun received a phone call at 03:00 hours informing her that her husband was alive and recovering at a medical facility in Germany. Her emotional response reflected months of grief being transformed into overwhelming relief, while her questions about his condition revealed concern for physical and psychological trauma that families couldn't fully understand without security clearances that would never be provided. The family notification process requires careful coordination between operational security and humanitarian considerations, explained Major Stevens, who supervised communication with family members whose emotional needs had to be balanced against classification requirements that prevented detailed explanation of rescue circumstances or prisoner treatment. The children of rescued personnel faced particular challenges in understanding why their parents' return couldn't be celebrated publicly or shared with friends whose families might not understand the security requirements that governed military operations. 8-year-old Susan Martinez struggled to comprehend why her father's homecoming had to be kept secret from schoolmates who had attended memorial services for soldiers presumed dead. Dr. Rebecca Walsh, a military psychologist specializing in family reintegration following traumatic separations, coordinated counseling services for families whose emotional recovery would require professional support to address psychological trauma that affected entire family units rather than individual service members. Her programs addressed the unique challenges faced by families whose loved ones had been rescued from situations that couldn't be publicly acknowledged or discussed. Family members experienced secondary trauma from uncertainty and grief that suddenly transformed into relief and joy. Dr. Walsh explained during staff meetings that coordinated comprehensive care for rescued personnel and their families. The classification requirements add additional psychological stress because families can't share their experiences with support networks that might not have appropriate security clearances. The institutional response to successful prisoner rescue included policy reviews that examined whether current special operations doctrine adequately addressed tactical situations that required individual initiative and unconventional approaches. Senior military leadership was forced to confront contradictions between regulatory compliance and operational effectiveness that had been revealed through recent events. Patricia Sullivan convened a classified review board that examined institutional approaches to individual operator autonomy and tactical flexibility, administrative processes that had systematically discouraged exactly the qualities that had proven essential for mission success. The review would influence future training programs and operational policies in ways that balanced institutional control with tactical effectiveness. We need to determine whether our emphasis on procedural compliance is preventing effective response to tactical situations that require individual judgment and initiative. Sullivan stated during opening remarks that acknowledged institutional responsibility for creating conditions that had nearly prevented successful rescue operations. The policy review would examine whether military effectiveness was being compromised by administrative approaches that prioritized risk management and bureaucratic oversight over tactical innovation and individual competence. The questions being raised challenged fundamental assumptions about command structure and operational control that had shaped military doctrine for decades. Jack Morrison's return to Fort Bragg occurred without fanfare or official recognition. Administrative processing that restored his operational status while maintaining institutional fiction about his recent activities. His arrival at the Special Operations Training Facility was noted only by personnel who understood that exceptional accomplishment sometimes required official anonymity to protect operational security and political interests. His first day back involved reviewing training schedules for new recruits who would benefit from instruction by someone whose recent experiences included successful completion of missions that training programs couldn't simulate or anticipate. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was returning to teach soldiers whose careers might someday depend on developing exactly the tactical flexibility that institutional authorities had declared unsuitable for military service. The training modifications that Jack implemented emphasized individual initiative and tactical adaptation over procedural compliance and rigid adherence to established doctrine. His instruction methods reflected understanding that modern warfare required operators who could think independently and adapt to changing circumstances without constant guidance from command authorities, who might not understand local tactical conditions. Military effectiveness depends on individual competence and judgment, rather than institutional procedures that can't anticipate every tactical situation. Jack explained to recruits who were learning that successful operations sometimes required violating regulations that were designed for routine circumstances rather than extreme situations that tested the limits of human capability and institutional flexibility. His teaching approach emphasized practical problem-solving over theoretical knowledge, encouraging soldiers to develop tactical thinking that could adapt established procedures to unexpected circumstances that required creative solutions to complex problems. The lessons he was providing would influence military effectiveness in ways that extended far beyond individual careers or specific operational assignments. 3 months after the rescue operation, Jack received an unmarked package at his quarters, containing items that represented unofficial recognition from personnel whose lives had been preserved through his tactical innovations and individual initiative. The contents included unit patches from every organization that had been represented among the rescued prisoners, silent acknowledgments from professionals who understood the difference between institutional approval and authentic respect. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell's contribution was a photograph taken during her recovery at Landstuhl, showing all 75 rescued prisoners together for the first and only time since their extraction. On the back, she had written, "For the man who proved that impossible missions become possible when someone refuses to accept that following orders is more important than saving lives. Staff Sergeant Chun's edition was a modified challenge coin that incorporated symbols from every unit represented among the rescued prisoners, a piece of metalwork that had been created during his rehabilitation as a form of occupational therapy. The inscription read, "Courage is not the absence of institutional approval, but action taken despite official disapproval when lives depend on individual judgment." The collection grew over time as other rescued personnel contributed items that represented their appreciation for tactical leadership that had transcended institutional limitations and bureaucratic constraints. Each edition reflected understanding that true military effectiveness sometimes required exactly the qualities that regulatory compliance sought to eliminate from modern warfare. Agent Patricia Hawkins sent a leather-bound journal containing tactical observations and lessons learned from situations where conventional approaches had proven inadequate for accomplishing missions that required unconventional thinking and individual initiative. Her notes emphasized the importance of maintaining tactical flexibility despite institutional pressure to conform to procedures that might not address the reality of complex operational environments. The journal's introduction stated, "Military doctrine evolves through the actions of individuals who recognize that established procedures are starting points rather than limitations, foundations for tactical thinking rather than restrictions on innovative problem-solving that circumstances might require." General Patricia Sullivan's unofficial recognition came through administrative channels that restored Jack's access to classified intelligence and operational planning that had been revoked during his disciplinary proceedings. Her decision to reinstate capabilities that institutional authorities had declared inappropriate reflected understanding that recent events had demonstrated the limitations of conventional thinking about individual operator autonomy and tactical effectiveness. The restoration of operational authorities was accompanied by assignment to positions that would utilize Jack's capabilities while providing institutional distance from missions that might require plausible deniability if political complications developed. His new role involved training and developing personnel whose careers might someday depend on exactly the tactical flexibility that bureaucratic thinking had systematically discouraged. 6 months after the rescue operation, families of the rescued prisoners began receiving college scholarship funds from an anonymous foundation that supported educational opportunities for children whose parents had served in classified operations that couldn't be publicly acknowledged. The scholarships represented recognition that extended beyond individual service members to families whose sacrifices included accepting uncertainty and classification requirements that prevented public acknowledgement of exceptional military service. Mrs. Janet Chun's daughter received notification that her engineering studies would be fully funded through a program that honored military families whose sacrifices contributed to national security in ways that couldn't be measured through conventional recognition programs. The scholarship letter included only brief mention that funding was provided in recognition of service that exemplified the highest traditions of military dedication and personal sacrifice. The educational opportunities represented investment in future generations whose parents had served in operations that protected American interests through methods that required official anonymity while deserving unofficial recognition for achievements that transcended individual careers and institutional limitations. 1 year after the prisoner rescue, Jack Morrison received orders for assignment to a position that would utilize his operational experience while maintaining appropriate classification levels for activities that affected strategic planning and international security. His new role involved developing training programs and operational procedures that would prepare personnel for situations where conventional doctrine provided inadequate guidance for tactical situations that required individual judgment and innovative problem solving. The assignment represented institutional acknowledgement that his Tactical capabilities were essential for military effectiveness while maintaining bureaucratic control over operations that could affect political and strategic interests. His career trajectory had been transformed from administrative exile to operational leadership through demonstration that individual competence and moral courage could accomplish missions that conventional approaches couldn't achieve. As Jack processed his new assignment orders, he reflected on the institutional irony that his greatest professional liability had become his most valuable operational asset. The qualities that bureaucratic thinking had declared unsuitable for military service had proven essential for accomplishing missions that protected American lives and strategic interests in ways that conventional military doctrine couldn't anticipate or address through established procedures. His story represented countless acts of individual initiative that occurred beyond official recognition, achievements that preserved lives and accomplished missions through capabilities that regulations couldn't anticipate or procedures couldn't duplicate. Military effectiveness often depended on individuals whose competence transcended institutional limitations, whose judgment operated independently of approval or recognition from authorities, who measured success through adherence to protocols rather than preservation of human life. The 75 American prisoners who returned home to families that had grieved their loss represented validation of principles that emphasized individual moral obligation over institutional compliance. When lives depended on action that exceeded authorized parameters, their survival demonstrated that impossible missions became possible when someone possessed both the capability and the courage to act. Despite official disapproval and potential personal consequences, true leadership operated in the spaces between institutional authority and moral necessity, emerging from individuals who understood that following orders was not always the same as doing what was right. Jack Morrison's refusal to accept that 75 American lives were expendable because their rescue violated established procedures had proven that individual conscience and tactical competence could overcome institutional limitations that prioritized regulatory compliance over human survival. The official records would never mention his name or acknowledge his role in the largest prisoner rescue in modern military history. But 75 American families knew that someone had refused to abandon their loved ones when conventional military wisdom declared their rescue impossible. In the end, that knowledge was the only recognition that truly mattered. The impossible had become possible through individual initiative that transcended institutional thinking, proving that military effectiveness sometimes required exactly the qualities that bureaucratic authority sought to eliminate from modern warfare. Some battles were won not through technological superiority or overwhelming force, but through individual courage and tactical innovation that operated beyond the boundaries of official approval. Jack Morrison returned to his duties knowing that his greatest achievement would remain forever classified, acknowledged only by the people whose lives he had saved and the families who would never know how close they had come to receiving folded flags instead of homecoming embraces. In a world that measured success through public recognition and official awards, true heroism often operated in silence, accomplishing the impossible while the world's attention was focused elsewhere. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.